Tax day, who doesn't hate this day, right? Well, we begin a flashback on taxes. Let us see if you remember this.
My plan is this postcard. This is the size of what we're talking about right here.
Imagine a simple flat tax. That lets every American fill out his or her taxes on a postcard.
Instead of 7 brackets, there'll be just 4. Oh, and we will make things so simple, you can fill your taxes on the form the size of a postcard.
Most Americans will be able to file taxes on a single sheet of paper. What do you think about that, Kevin? You still there, or is it going to be a paper and a half, huh?
A postcard. Well, quit dreaming about that. But can you imagine how easy life would be? Instead, every year by today, the IRS demands that Americans file pages and pages and pages of their tax returns. Maybe you already personally filed yours. If so, kudos to you. Or maybe you hired someone else to do them like I do. That's because I'm afraid of getting it wrong and ending up in jail. America's tax code is so complicated. According to the National Taxpayers Union, the tax code in America is 70,000 pages. The average American spends $290 getting his or her tax returns completed. Overall in America, that is $10 billion spent just filing the return. There's also this. The average American spends 13 hours per year on tax preparation. Overall in America, that is 7.1 billion hours on tax preparation. Well, that is a lot. But there's some good news. With all that time and money people are spending, this tax year, there are some who are getting bigger refunds. Moments ago, I spoke with South Dakota Republican and Senate Majority Leader John Thune. Senator, nice to talk to you again, sir.
Great to be with you. Thanks, Greta.
Senator, what are we going to do about the shutdown? We need DHS, we need TSA, we need a lot of things.
We sure do, and the Democrats have made it virtually impossible to fund all of the government because they have adopted the open borders, defund law enforcement position for which they have been known in the past, but which I thought they had gotten over. But they clearly, Greta, have made a conscious decision that they want to play politics, and I think this is about their political base. That's what they're demanding, and as a consequence, we're having to come up with a different way of funding ICE and CBP into the future. They are funded today. Thankfully, we had the foresight last summer to know that this was probably going to be a problem, and so we pre-funded DHS and or at least CBP and ICE within DHS. But now we're going to have to do that into the future as well, because I don't think the Democrats are ever going to come off of this position of open borders and defund law enforcement. That seems to be where they're comfortable, and I think it's a loser with the American people, but we'll find out.
Do you speak to Senator Schumer often? I mean, what kind of relationship do you have with him?
We talk on occasion. Obviously, he, I think, right now is in a position where his political base is very demanding of him. The left-wing, progressive wing of the Democrat Party is where the energy is, where all the campaign resources are, where all the volunteers are these days, and so he has to cater to that, which makes it harder for him to come to the middle. But there are occasions, obviously, when we sit down and talk and figure out, if we can, a path forward. But in many cases, I think because of the demands he feels from his political base, he's not in a position to do things that, frankly, in my view, are in the best interest of the institution of the Senate and the country, like funding the government, like funding ICE and CBP, protecting the border, Homeland Security, national security. Those are things that every American ought to be for, no matter your political party. But these days, the Democrat Party in this country has moved so far left, and I think, for better or worse, Chuck Schumer is representative of that.
The issue, though, about voter ID is so popular for so many people, about 70 or 80% of the population, and yet he's not in favor of that. So how does that reconcile if he's making political moves to satisfy his base, and that he's ignoring an issue that's actually quite popular across the board?
And I think he and all Democrats need to be held accountable for that vote, Greta. If you think about that, and we gave him a vote, a simple vote, because the Save America Act includes other pieces. There are 5 different components to it, but we gave them a rifle shot vote. Are you for or are you against voter ID? A simple requirement that you have to show some kind of a government ID, a photo, when you go to vote. And the Democrats, with every exception, I think maybe, I can't remember, John Fetterman actually voted with us on that, but almost every Democrat voted no on that issue, even though many of them have been out there saying publicly that we are for voter ID, and we have voter ID in our state, and it works. And Chuck Schumer has in that camp. He said those things in the past, and yet when push came to shove and they had an opportunity to put their money where their mouth was, they all voted no on the narrow, simple issue of whether or not you ought to have to show an ID when you go vote on Election Day. That was all we were, we narrowed it down so that they couldn't say all these other issues were impacting their vote. This was a very narrow, confined issue, and they all voted no.
All right, today is tax day. I know that tax legislation doesn't begin in the Senate, but you used to be in the House years ago. You know, the code is just so out of control. Nobody understands it at all. I bet 95% of the U.S. Senate hires somebody else to do his taxes. I mean, it really is sort of a failing by Congress for generations not to make this easy. Will we ever see tax reform?
Well, you know, what we did last summer, it had elements of tax reform in it. It obviously had lowering of taxes on working families in this country and pro-growth policies that will create greater growth in our economy, to create better paying jobs and higher wages for people in this country. So, you know, obviously pocketbook issues, economic issues are front and center for us and for President Trump, and we want to continue to put our country in the best position possible when it comes to a brighter, more prosperous future, where you've got faster growth in the economy and those good paying jobs being created out there. I do think, however, as you point out, that the tax code could be significantly simpler than it is today. And everybody farms out their tax preparation. Not everybody, but a lot of people do, because it has gotten so complicated. And the next thing that we do next time we go in and do anything with respect to the tax code, it ought to be with an eye toward reforming it to make it simpler and easier for people to do their own returns in the future.
I forgot who it was in past history, but would give all his economic as tax information to two preparers and got two completely different answers. And you know, when you hear something like that, you know, look, none of us wants to go to jail. None of us wants to pay late fees. None of us wants to pay interest because the IRS decides that we owe more when we, in good faith, filled out these forms the best we thought we could, or our preparers did. But it's incredibly high risk for everybody.
Well, it is, and I'm not disputing that at all, and I think there are things that we could do and should be doing to make it simpler. I mean, I think broadening the base, lowering rates, reducing the number of rates. And, you know, there are lots of things that you know, I think ought to be on the table when it comes to simplification. But I will tell you this: thanks to what we did last summer, people who are filing their tax returns, and today is tax day, are paying a lot less. 24% less than during the Biden administration. And if you're somebody who gets income from tips and overtime, or somebody who is a senior citizen who is eligible for the reduced taxation on seniors in this country and Social Security, you are seeing a 50% reduction in your tax liability, or 50%, I should say, bigger tax refund this year than you have in past years. No tax on tips, no tax on overtime, and no tax on, I should say, lower taxes on seniors on Social Security, are all things that are benefiting literally millions of people across this country and putting more money in their pockets and not forcing them to send more to Washington, D.C. So, yes, can it be simplified more? Absolutely. But are we lowering taxes on working families? You know, in things that we did, 34 million families that take the child tax credit. There are 100 million Americans who claim the standard deduction, both of which have been doubled and now made permanent and actually increased above even what we did back in 2017 with that tax reform. So there is it's a new, I think, day in America in terms of working families and the opportunities they have available to them because of the more money they have in their pockets as a result of what we did last summer.
And I should emphasize again that this all has to begin in the House and not the Senate. And you're a gentleman not to say, don't blame me, blame the House. They haven't done it. That's where it starts, not with you.
I try not to do anyway, that, but yeah.
I know. I said you're a gentleman. You didn't say, don't ask me. Go talk to the House. Anyway, thank you, sir. Nice to see you, and happy tax day. Coming up, a possible global sigh of relief. Hear what President Trump says. That when the record continues.
Information. Truth is power. Is freedom? Is money? Is health? Is Newsmax. Millions watch it. So can you. Newsmax is real news for real people.
No way this all fits.
Watch me.
Oh, we're watching, Gary. They're right. We need weather tech.
I thought they only make floor liners and cargo liners.
Really, Gary? Really, Gary? Who do you think made the seat protector, side window deflectors, no drill mud flaps?
And the cup foam.
And I just ordered WeatherTech's newest products. Ta-da!
Hitch Basket makes for easy loading of heavy and bulky gear and increased storage capacity with a roof basket up top. Buy American at WT.com.
WeatherTech for the win.
Need blood pressure support? Total Beets contain a patented key ingredient clinically shown to deliver 2 times better blood pressure support. That's why Total Beets is the #1 best-selling beets brand in America. Take control of your health with Total Beets. Search Amazon now for Total Beets.
As Americans, we're fair and logical. 83% of us favor requiring a photo ID to vote. In fact, most of the civilized world requires it, but not us. We need to be able to trust that only eligible Americans are casting ballots. Democrats oppose voter ID for no coherent reason. Republicans favor it but haven't acted. What are they waiting for? Call your United States senators and tell them to pass the Save America Act today.
Every day, bumps and bangs happen. Bruises are optional. Use daily dermatologist recommended Dermend and reduce the appearance of bruises. Get Dermend Moisturizing Bruise Cream in the first aid aisle.
1 month from today, on May 15th, Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell's term expires. President Trump has already chosen his replacement. It is former member of the U.S. Federal Reserve Board of Governors, Kevin Warsh. And today, U.S. Secretary of the Treasury Scott Bessent said this about Warsh.
He's a great candidate. We know that the Republicans on the Senate Finance or Senate Banking Committee are aligned in that, and I am very optimistic that Kevin Warsh will be the chair of the Fed on time.
Also today, President Trump told the media this about Powell, quote, "I will have to fire him, okay, if he's not leaving on time. I have held back firing him. I have wanted to fire him, but I hate to be controversial," end quote. Well, you might be asking yourself, how would Powell remain at the Federal Reserve after his term as chairman expires in 1 month? Well, the answer is this. He could stay on as a member of the Board of Governors until his separate term expires in 2028. Meanwhile, at the top of the hour, the markets closed, and the score today. The S&P hit an all-time high, soaring over 7,000, and thus, obviously, it closed up. The NASDAQ also closed up, and the Dow, well, it closed down. And are we close to seeing the end of the war in Iran? Well, today, President Trump told the media, quote, "We have beaten them militarily, totally. I think it's close to over. I view it as very close to over. If I pulled up stakes right now, it would take them 20 years to rebuild that country, and we are not finished. We'll see what happens. I think they want to make a deal very badly," end quote. Following those remarks from the president, White House Press Secretary Carolyn Leavitt said this about the war in Iran.
I saw some reporting, again, bad reporting this morning, that we had formally requested an extension of the ceasefire. That is not true at this moment. We remain very much engaged in these negotiations, in these talks. You heard from the vice president directly and the president this week that these conversations are productive and ongoing. We feel good about the prospects of a deal. The president mentioned that in his interview yesterday. And it's obviously in the best interest of Iran to meet the president's demands. I think he's made his red lines in these negotiations very clear to the other side, and so we are continuing to see how these conversations go.
Former White House Chief of Staff in the first Trump administration, Mark Meadows, joins me. Nice to see you, Mark.
It's great to be with you.
I just spoke with Senator John Thune, and he mentioned what everyone keeps repeating in the media and every place, is that the party in power always loses the midterms. Why is that? Why does the party in power lose in the midterms?
Well, I think there's a broad dissatisfaction with Washington, D.C., and when it's not a presidential year, the natural reaction is just to throw the bums out and get somebody else. That being said, I don't think it's a foregone conclusion. Obviously, you and I have talked about this. If Iran is in the rearview mirror and not at our windshield, that will help a whole bunch. But the other part of that is a lot of times you coast into the midterms. And so my encouragement to Speaker Johnson and to Leader Thune would be continue to legislate, continue to show what you're doing for the American people. You know, today you were covering tax day. Listen, there's stuff that we can still do to reduce the burden on seniors. Let's lower the capital gains tax for those seniors that have houses and make sure that they can liquidate those instead of having to hold on to them.
You know, when I used to do my taxes for my mother when she was living, and she gets Social Security, the idea that she had to pay taxes on Social Security made me crazy. I thought, why don't you just give her less Social Security? Instead, we have to go through the hoops of filing the tax returns.
Well, it is, and it's sad. In some states have actually been pretty aggressive, like South Carolina. They don't tax Social Security and retirement plans.
But the feds do.
But the feds do, because it's all in a gamut where they say, well, we're going to give it to you with this hand, but we're going to take it away with the other.
And not to mention that you paid into it in the first place. It's not like it's you know, you paid for 40 years or whatever.
Well, and I didn't know your mom, but I can guarantee you that she spent her money more wisely than anybody here in this city would ever spend it.
But I don't know how hard she worked to get it, though. I must say, in all candor, she was not the hardest working person I ever met. I loved her, but that was a short suit. But okay, now you were in the House, and I asked this of Thune too. Is this tax code? It's insane. 70,000 pages. No one in his right mind can read that. 70,000 pages, and I mean, like, is it ever going to change? I mean, we had the postcard for a while. People said it was going to be on a postcard, but I mean, both parties must feel the pain of that.
Well, you've covered this. When Senator Ted Cruz ran for office, he was talking about filing your taxes on a postcard. But we can do so much better. But here's what happens. You know, a few blocks from right where we're broadcasting this today is K Street. And when you look at K Street, it's not just the special interest on the left, it's the special interest on the right. And so they all come in. And one of the big things is the American people on Main Street, they're tired of big corporations winning. And yet Capitol Hill, a lot of times, will give carve-outs for this corporation and the other. I think you simplify it, you let everybody have a little bit of skin in the game, and indeed, have it where it can be filed on a postcard.
Well, I remember how horrified I was with Obamacare because it was 2,200 pages when it first got, and I tried to read it, and I read legislation as a lawyer forever, and I couldn't file. It was incomprehensible. Really. Then they sent it over to HHS, and it became 20,000 pages, and I was scandalized, like, because all of a sudden, all these people we'd never met before, never voted, were suddenly putting all these regulations into it. It was crazy. Well, now I hear that was 22,000 pages or something, and this is 70,000.
Well, it's not only is it so complex that even your paid professionals that are preparing tax returns, a lot of times they're scratching their head. Well, how does this apply? But you hit the nail on the head. It's all about those regulations that go along with it. They complicate it even further. That keep everybody guessing. It keeps an entire industry at work. And yet, if you simplified it, I believe you'd get more money into the Treasury because you'd have less loopholes for big corporations and others to exploit, and the average American would love it because they wouldn't dread April 15th.
Well, and the notes you get from them are they sound like they're going to send you to jail. They act like you're a crook because you made, because they say you made a mistake when you didn't prepare it yourself. I mean, they infer such dirty minds on behalf of the American taxpayers. The IRS does.
Well, they do. Hopefully, Secretary Bassett, we were talking about the Fed chair and that new Fed chair. Well, hopefully, there's a real push to say, let's simplify it. But can you?
But will Congress listen to them? Because Congress is the one who's got to do this.
Congress is the one that has to do it. I think that there are a number of people that do that. But once you get in power, once you get to be a chairman of one of those committees, everybody's coming. They're writing the checks to you. So it's time that we say that if you have something before Congress, that you don't lobby Congress, especially if you're giving money to some of these key members on Ways and Means. And I'm talking about both sides of the aisle. They both do it. But it's time that we do it. But the American people ultimately, You ask why the midterms are such a problem? It's because we've been talking about a simplified tax code for decades, and yet it's not done. And they pull their hair out. Why is it so hard? And it shouldn't be. I just tell the person who prepares me, I just don't want to go to jail. I mean, tell me what I have to pay. I don't want to go to jail. That's all. At least not now. Mark Meadows, thank you. Great to be with you. Coming up, weight loss drugs are everywhere. Could they be a miracle drug? Wait till you see what they're helping with now. That when the record continues.
I switched.
I switched. I switched.
I switched to Newsmax.
Newsmax. Newsmax.
Have you made the switch?
You bet I did. My whole family switched.
Millions are switching to Newsmax. You should too.
Hi, I'm Troy Aikman. I've always loved football and music, and that's what led me to Venue, one of the fastest growing publicly traded entertainment companies. Now they're offering Fire Suites, absolute triple net real estate delivering an 11% annual return paid monthly. Simple, predictable, passive income. Visit investvenue.com to learn more.
What if your GLP-1 for weight loss was as easy to take as a mint? Small, discreet, and easy. Think about that, no needles. This is compounded tirzepatide, a mint-flavored tablet designed to fit into your daily routine. You simply let it dissolve under your tongue. No mixing, filling, or storing your own syringes. Tirzepatide helps curb appetite and supports healthier eating by reducing cravings, including for sweets and carbs. And when your appetite feels under control, it can make it easier to eat less and move intentionally towards your weight loss goals. If weight loss has been on your mind, this may be the needle-free option you've been looking for. A simple daily tablet, as easy to take as a mint. Getting started is fast and surprisingly accessible. Just complete a quick online physician consultation. Here's how.
Save $50 with promo code SLIM at noneedles.com/slim. That's promo code SLIM at noneedles.com/slim.
My heart has experienced life-changing wins, losses, and countless miles. To keep living at my speed, I trust Cunol CoQ10. CoQ10 is the #1 cardiologist-recommended supplement for heart health. Cunol, the brand I trust.
If your dog struggles with stiff joints, low energy, messy poops, or an itchy coat, the cause might be sitting in your dog's food bowl right now. Kibble. That's why we created Badlands Ranch Superfood Complete, gently air-dried, packed with real canine superfoods to help your dog unlock puppy-like energy, smoother digestion, healthier joints, shinier coats, and more. Thousands have already made the switch. Visit your local pet food retailer today.
Americans have lost billions of dollars in their retirement accounts during the dot-com bubble of 2000.
And inflation is only getting worse.
Patriot Gold Group just introduced our America 250 Inflation Protection No Fee for Life IRA.
I'm sure glad Eileen and I rolled over our IRAs into gold in 2019.
On Wall Street, there's a saying, sell in May and go away.
My saying is call the Patriot Gold Group today.
Give Patriot Gold Group a call at 1-800-778-4156.
Patriot Gold Group is Consumer Affairs' top-rated gold and silver dealer nationwide. The only firm nationwide where you, the client, work directly with an owner. Home of the No Fee for Life IRA. Patriot Gold Group is patriots protecting patriots.
Call now, 1-800-778-4156.
Some very encouraging news about GLP-1 drugs, commonly thought as weight loss drugs. Researchers in the United States and Canada have found that the active ingredient in some of these popular drugs, semaglutide, have other benefits. People lose weight with Ozempic, Wegovy, and Zepbound, but these drugs are found to reduce the risk of heart attacks and strokes and help address other medical problems such as chronic kidney disease. And now, a doctor in Toronto says these drugs help improve liver health. He says, quote, "We have seen in clinical trials that patients who lose very little weight see the same reductions in liver inflammation, scarring, and enzyme levels as those who lose a great deal of weight. Now we know why," end quote. Well, with the different benefits these drugs bring, it could potentially change the way they are prescribed and could modify the way insurance covers the cost. In the latest edition of our Off the Record, I spoke with my old friend, Dr. Jennifer Ashton. She's a board-certified OBGYN and obesity medicine physician. We spoke about the different benefits and risks of weight loss drugs. Dr. Ashton also has a website you should check, joinagenda.com, agenda spelled with a J, where she has many health articles, recipes, and results from wellness experiments. Here's our conversation. I'm going to read you some of these things. Ozempic, Wegovy, Zepbound, Mounjaro, Saxenda, Victoza. Are they all the same?
They are the same class. They're the incretin class. The dose can differ. The route of administration can differ. You know, now there's Foundayo, which is the newly FDA-approved pill form of GLP-1, just newly approved, I think, 2 weeks ago now. So they all are, you can consider them as cousins with the same last name.
All right, but if you go in to see a doctor for a problem, I mean, does a doctor sort of, I mean, I would, listening to you, they must have certain ones are good for certain problems more than other ones, or is that not necessarily true?
Not necessarily true, because we're learning more and more about the unexpected, in many cases, downstream effects of these medications. You know, unfortunately, in the media, you hear a lot about possible side effects and risks and adverse effects, which is always important to consider when you're talking about any medication. You don't hear as much about the unexpected positives. It is out there. People are covering it, like you. But a lot of these positive benefits, if you will, to this class of medication are being found by serendipity, because so many millions of people are taking them. And now finally, they're all under a microscope. And so if, you know, one of them finds that their hair is growing more, you know, that's going to be a headline. But we've known now for some time that there are a lot of positive, beneficial effects that have nothing to do with weight loss seen with this class of medication.
Well, the one that what sort of prompted my wanting to talk to you today is the liver. I read that it might have some benefit for the liver. Now, that's brand new. I hadn't heard that one before.
Yeah, and that's research that just came out of Canada, actually. And, you know, other people are looking at that as well. And, you know, to get into kind of the mini med school of that whole process, you know, first we have to go back to what was found when people with the conditions of overweight and obesity took these medications. Now, yes, the number on the scale went down. Right? That's not a surprise. Most people are aware of that kind of as an end result. But as they were being followed appropriately by a physician, not like a medi-spa kind of, you know, phone-in order left to DIY this medication, they were also being studied for other things. So how was their heart doing? What inflammatory markers that we can test for in blood were changing, going down maybe? And the liver is one of those things. So, you know, we know that people who are overweight, have overweight and obesity, are at higher risk for something called fatty liver disease. And this is metabolic associated fatty liver disease. It is a major, major problem. We don't talk about it enough. Anyone in the field of obesity medicine knows that this is a significant issue with anyone with a weight condition. What researchers in Canada found in mice is that when mice were given these class of medications, they were having independent improvement in their liver cell function that had nothing to do with pounds lost or weight, or in the case of a mouse, ounces lost. And that is really, really interesting data. It supports the kind of other positive side effects that are seen with this class of medication, like reducing systemic inflammatory markers and having an improvement on your immune system. And now, really for the first time, we're seeing that, yes, liver cells do have GLP-1 receptors, and this medication is working on those cells to kind of heal from a chronic liver condition, which is really, really interesting.
And you can have this problem without being obese. I mean, because most of these people are, you know, like, you think of like heart problems, well, you need to lose 20 pounds and it'll help a lot. But I mean, so you think that's why it helps the heart, because it helps you lose the weight. Are these medicines helpful regardless of your weight?
Well, there's a lot of emerging data, again, both in animals and in humans, that the answer is yes, because of their effects on inflammation, on the immune system, on particle size of our cholesterol molecules, all positive kind of effects that have nothing to do with the number on the scale. So, the potential is that these then can be formally studied for those indications, eventually, hopefully get FDA approval for that, which will then trigger that cascade of insurance covering it for reasons that have nothing to do with the actual weight a person is, which would be interesting.
Are they anti-inflammatories?
Yeah, there's a lot of data. There's a lot of data that these drugs have a very powerful anti-inflammatory result. It's not totally clear why or how that occurs. We don't know whether that's the cause or the effect, so to speak, or putting, the chicken and the egg. I'll give you an example that you and I have talked about actually with these medications offline, in our private life. But, a lot of people on these medications, it's well known, well reported now that they tend to consume alcohol less, right? It just kills the drive for alcohol. And that for many/most people is a good thing, right? So what happens when you consume less alcohol? Well, that lowers your systemic or overall inflammatory level just in and of itself. So we're starting to do the basic science as well as clinical research with these medications now that can help tell us how much of what we're seeing, let's say, whether it's with the liver or with your inflammatory markers, have to do with changes in behavior, and how much has to do with the drug specifically in and of itself, and how much has to do with both. And right now, that's not totally well known, but it is known that there's a really significant anti-inflammatory result.
She is so smart, isn't she? Okay, imagine buying a raffle ticket for a little over $100 and winning a $1 million painting. Well, that's exactly what happened to a Parisian art enthusiast. He won a Pablo Picasso painting. What did the self-proclaimed art amateur think once he received the call that he won? He asked, "How do I check it's not a hoax?" The raffle was for Picasso's Head of a Woman portrait. He painted it in 1941. Lottery organizers say they sold 120,000 tickets worldwide. They brought in $14 million for Alzheimer's research. 1 million euros of that 14 million will be paid to the international art dealership that owned the painting. As for the winner, well, he says he plans on keeping it. Coming up, Senator Chuck Schumer calls the Iran war a failure. How does his Democratic colleague, Senator John Fetterman, feel about it? He joins me. Plus, there is new audio of U.S. ships executing the blockade on Iranian ports.
Do not attempt to breach the blockade. Vessels will be boarded for interdiction and seizure.
The full audio when the record continues.
You know Rob Finnerty. He's smart, bold, and stands strong for your values. Rob is fighting for you. Watch Finnerty weeknights only on Newsmax.
Stop. Check this out. Our most advanced performance frame, Talon, is out. It's a bestseller. We just got it back in stock, and I want to show you a little bit about it. These come with our signature lost and broken protection, and you can try them risk-free for 30 days. Check them out at shadyrays.com.
Think you need a new roof? Think again and save thousands. We'll help you put off the high cost of a roof replacement for at least 5 years.
Or 10. Or sometimes even 15.
We're America's most trusted roofer because we always try to save your roof rather than replace it.
We'll restore your roof for a fraction of the cost of a new one. But don't wait. If your roof loses too much protective coating, it's too late. Call now or scan the code and we'll give you an assessment of your roof for free.
Oh no, is this the episode with the breakup?
Reba, we can't agree on the house.
Y'all need Realtor.com. With over 500,000 new listings every month, you could find the one today. This could be it. Better put a key ring on it. Realtor.com.
A better heart health supplement.
That's what we all want. That's why for 8 years now, I've relied on this heart powder. It's Super Beets, and I swear by it.
Super Beets is the original #1 selling beet brand for healthy blood pressure support. The only cardiologist-recommended beet brand that's also trusted by over 40 national championship-winning pro and college sports teams for cardio-powered energy.
For cardio results you can feel, the only brand I trust is Super Beets.
Try Super Beets today at human.com.
What if you're sick at home or traveling and can't get medical help or prescriptions? Doctors say a medical emergency kit is the answer. Joining me is Dr. Drew.
Thank you. And yes, these kits put you in charge of your health. They come with physician-prescribed medication to treat multiple common and some serious issues as well.
What are some examples?
Sure. Generic Z-Pak, amoxicillin, other essential antibiotics and antivirals that treat flu, pneumonia, strep, ear infections, sinus infections, urinary tract infections, and more.
So it is like urgent care and a pharmacy at home?
Exactly. No waiting, no pharmacy, no copays. You feel better faster and avoid serious complications.
How do you know what medicines to take?
You just match your symptoms to the doctor-written guide or schedule a quick telehealth call.
Sound advice. Order online in minutes at the website below and save $45. Thank you, doctor.
Visit urgentcarekit.com/news, promo code news.
Simparica Trio protects against 3 categories of parasites.
Power of disease.
This drug class has been associated with neurologic side effects, including seizures. Use with caution in dogs with or without a history of these disorders. Don't just protect, triple protect.
Allegiance Flag Supply believes American flags should be made in America.
Our symbol of freedom made outside our borders, that did not sit right.
Join us in our mission to keep the American flag truly American. Don't settle for flags made elsewhere.
Every flag is proudly crafted in the USA with superior materials.
Visit showallegiance.com to order your high-quality, made in America flag today. That's showallegiance.com.
We have an update on Trump's blockade in Iran. Today, U.S. Central Command said that during the first 48 hours of the blockade, quote, no vessels have made it past U.S. forces. Additionally, 9 vessels have complied with direction from U.S. forces to turn around and return toward an Iranian port or coastal area, end quote. Today, CENTCOM also released audio of U.S. ships at sea carrying out the blockade.
The U.S. has announced a formal blockade of Iranian ports and coastal areas. This is a legal action. All vessels are advised to immediately return to port if leaving and discontinue transit to Iran if that is your next port of call. Do not attempt to breach the blockade. Vessels will be boarded for interdiction and seizure, transiting to or from an Iranian port. Turn around and prepare to be boarded. If you do not comply with this blockade, we will use force. The whole of the United States Navy is ready to force compliance. Now.
Today, President Trump wrote on Truth Social, quote, China is very happy that I'm permanently opening the Strait of Hormuz. I'm doing it for them also and the world. This situation will never happen again. They have agreed not to send weapons to Iran. President Xi will give me a big, fat hug when I get there in a few weeks. We're working together smartly and very well. Does that not beat fighting? But remember, we are very good at fighting if we have to, far better than anyone else, end quote. And today, Iran's Joint Military Command Chief warned the United States if the naval blockade of Iran continues, Iran will block exports and imports across the entire region. That is some of the latest foreign reaction. Back at home, Trump has also seen some reaction from Capitol Hill.
So let's call Trump's Iran policy for what it is. Not Trump's Operation Epic Fury, Trump's Operation Epic Failure. Starting this week, we will bring a war powers resolution to the floor, and if Republicans block it, we will vote again and again and again until this war ends.
Democratic Pennsylvania Senator John Fetterman joins me. Good afternoon, sir. And the Senate Minority Leader says it's an epic failure, the policy of the war in Iran. Do you have the sense that that's the feeling of all the members of the Democratic senators in the Senate, obviously, or are there some who just are silent and agree that this is a good procedure?
Well, I mean, there are many Democrats that do think that it was a failure or whatever, but I do there are others that have supported, at least many aspects of Epic Fury, but I am the only Democrat that's supported Epic Fury. And just a little ago, I voted against the latest War Powers Act too, as again, the only Democrat. And what Leader Schumer said is just categorically not true. I mean, many aspects are much better, and just eliminating leadership, incredible. And those videos you're playing right now, just destroying the Iranian military capabilities and making it more and more difficult, if not impossible, to build a nuclear bomb. And holding them accountable and destroying many part of their capabilities to fire missiles at Iran. And to Israel from Iran. And now Israel also continues to pulverize Hezbollah. And it's humiliating for Iran, too, because they can't defend and help Hezbollah, and they're begging for a ceasefire. And, of course, Hezbollah can't really respond, and all they've ever done is just fire at the civilians, and thankfully, Israel's been able to delect the vast majority of them. So, to call that a failure, I don't understand, unless because Trump's been behind it. That's why we have to describe it a failure. But I think, it's been a good thing. And I haven't agreed with every single aspect, but I do think it was a great thing to block the Strait too. And it was an incredible way to remind Iran and the world that we still run things. We run things, and calling their bluff and humiliate them and remind them, I can control the Strait. It's like, no, actually we can't, and we will. And then that would force and get China will get involved too, because a significant percentage of their oil comes directly through that strait, and holding these other kinds of countries that were paying for a lot of the terrorism and the Iranian regime, and holding them accountable to remind them now we can control it. Yeah, Iran can create chaos, but at the end of the day, we can own it and we can hold them accountable.
Well, you and I have been discussing for quite some time what's been going on in the Middle East, and we probably started our conversation talking about October 7th, and Hamas is still refusing to disarm, and that was step 2 in that 20-point plan. I mean, while Israel is demolishing Hezbollah, the United States is holding very tough against Iran and taking out its military assets and hopefully its nuclear capabilities. What's going to become of Hamas? I mean, I'm a little bit stunned that Hamas doesn't see the writing on the wall, because Prime Minister Netanyahu is not going to just skip over point 2, which is disarmament.
Yeah, well, they might try to resist that thing, but the truth is they've just been reduced to just a bunch of tunnel rats. They haven't been able to essentially do anything at this point. So I think whether what they're willing to say versus where the reality is, Hamas has been effectively neutralized at this point. And the longer that they pretend that they don't have to disarm, then they're going to keep their Palestinians living in these tent cities, and you can never have an opportunity to rebuild Gaza, which I hope they can just realize and accept that. But the good news is they are unable to harm Israel or do other things like after 10/7. Iran has been unable to defend anything for these proxies that they produced. And that's humiliating for Iran. And it also reminds all those people, Hezbollah and Houthis and Hamas, that they're fresh out of friends.
We're approaching the midterms. Obviously, important issues are Iran. Economy is always a very important issue. Affordability, people being able to buy gas and buy groceries and buy homes and everything. Do you have a sense? You're in the arena. We in the media we're on the sidelines. But do you have a sense how the midterms will go in the U.S. Senate?
The House, I don't think anyone really thinks that the Republicans are going to hold on to the House. And regardless of whether the gas prices or other thing, history, the House usually shifts in response to the party in power. That's history. You don't need to have a degree in politics to understand that that's probably going to happen regardless. And the Senate, more things are more in play, through a lot of the chaos for that. I don't know, but I think, honestly, North Carolina is likely going to flip for the Democratic side. And now I do think Senator Ossoff will prevail in Georgia as well, too. And, the majority in the Senate is going to come down to Maine, and it's going to come down to Ohio. And you can kind of see the values, the incredible high values, the money that are going into it. And look, in Texas, I'm stunned. I saw that Teleraco, he raised $27 million in the first quarter. The amount of money that's going into it, although even the Democrats still are unsure that you could possibly flip the seat in Texas, but also Pallotta, she raised $9 million in the first quarter in Alaska. It is definitely in play beyond most people would have thought a year ago that the Senate was considered, and that my recollection is four races all tilted and shifted all in the direction of the Democrats.
Senator John Fetterman from the great state of Pennsylvania, thank you, sir, as always.
No, thank you for having me, and have me back.
Thank you, sir. What is next for the House after the resignations of Democrat Eric Swalwell and Republican Tony Gonzalez? Florida Democratic Congresswoman Sheila Sherfless McCormick is facing calls to resign. She is accused of stealing $5 million from FEMA funds and using that money to fund her campaign. McCormick denies any wrongdoing. She's also refusing to resign, so now she faces expulsion from Congress by the whole House. Today's Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, spoke about Congresswoman McCormick.
There's another Democrat, Sherfless McCormick, who will be to a sentencing hearing on Tuesday of next week through the House Ethics Committee. They investigated and gave her so much due process that it took more than 2 years because she resisted it. I expect that they will come forward with a recommended punishment for the Congress, and I suspect that may be expulsion. In my view, that would be appropriate there.
She's not the only member of Congress currently mired in controversy. Florida Republican Congressman Corey Mills is also facing sexual misconduct allegations and allegedly breaking campaign finance rules. He likewise faces the threat of an expulsion vote. Mills says he does not fall into the category of Swalwell or Gonzalez. Mills says he never sexually harassed anyone and does not have any complaints by staffers or interns. Today, Speaker Johnson said he would look into the status of the Ethics Committee's investigation of him. Coming up, where in the world is Hunter Biden? He just might be on the other side of the world. Doing what? That when the record continues.
Don't kibble your dog.
Hey, Dr. Marty.
Hey, back.
What's wrong with this?
Let's check it out. It's still kibble, which means they're ultra-processed. At Dr. Marty, we freeze-dry premium meats, fruits, and vegetables, and it's available at your local pet store.
What's gold is new again. Pardon the pun. But considering gold has been used as currency since around 550 BC, it has been on fire the past year. I'm here with Daniel Boston, the founder of Preserve Gold. Why is gold so stable and such a good investment for many people?
Take the central bank, for example, the Federal Reserve. They print money out of thin air, and then they take that printed money to go buy hard assets like gold to protect themselves against the very risks that they're creating. So I always tell people, don't do what the big players are telling you to do. Do what they're doing themselves.
Yeah, watch what they're doing.
That's correct.
Okay. If people are interested in investing with Preserve Gold, how do they get started?
Text Newsmax to 50505 to get your free information and up to $15,000 in free gold and silver with a qualified purchase. That's right. Text Newsmax to 50505.
All right. No way you can miss it.
If you still have bad breath by lunchtime, your mouthwash isn't working. Smart Mouth is the only mouthwash that prevents bad breath for 24 hours. This is the only mouthwash I recommend. Upgrade your mouthwash to Smart Mouth today and never have bad breath again.
Kevin Sorbo here, and I have an important message to share. The government needs more money, your money. If you owe the IRS back taxes, they can garnish your wages and levy your bank accounts. They can even seize your retirement or take your home. Don't let the IRS target you. Call the professionals at Tax Network USA. Their tax lawyers and enrolled agents are experts in powerful programs that may even help you eliminate your tax debt.
Call for a free consultation or visit tnusa.com.
Slotomania, the #1 free slots game, presents the iconic Betty Boop, featuring amazing reels, exciting bonus games, and grand jackpots. Yes! Download Slotomania now, play Betty Boop slots, and get 25 free spins and 15 million free coins.
Hi, I'm Elmer Heinrich here with my son Rocky. Now, our company sells Immuno 150, an incredible nutritional supplement that contains 70 plant minerals and 80 additional nutrients.
That's right, Dad. Amino 150 has much more nutritional value than the average supplement because of the 150 ingredients that include the 70 minerals. The benefits are outstanding.
I suggest you try Amino 150 so you can experience the difference that 70 minerals can make in your life.
The first time I experienced vertigo, the room was spinning, like I was in a clothes dryer. Then I started taking LipoBalance support. Its ingredients are clinically shown to help reduce dizziness and spinning. Take back control with lipoflavonoid.
That's right. We have an update alert, and it involves an update on Hunter Biden. So where in the world is the former first son? According to Biden's lawyers in a court filing related to a lawsuit, Hunter has left the United States. However, the lawsuit does not mention where he went out of the United States. Last November, Hunter Biden said this in a podcast.
My wife is South African, and her family is here. We have been living in California since we've been married for the past 6.5 years or so. And when all of the political and personal stuff came to an end in the last 6 months, I had always promised that we would spend some time over here. So, we're trying to be between Cape Town and the States, go back and forth.
We mentioned a lawsuit, so who is suing Hunter Biden? His former lawyers. Why? Over unpaid legal fees. Biden owes about $50,000 to the firm relating to his tax and gun crimes cases. The former first son has also claimed that he has a $17 million debt. Meanwhile, the president's border czar, Tom Homan, is now chiming in on Pope Leo's criticism of Trump's immigration policy.
Speaking for myself, a lifelong Catholic, I wish they stay out of immigration. They don't know what they're talking about. If they understood the atrocities that happen on an open border, I think their opinion would change. And I welcome discussion with any of them because they don't understand. Illegal immigration is not a victimless crime. Where President Trump had the most secure border in the lifetime of this nation right now, lives are being saved. He's saving thousands of lives a year because he has a secure border.
You will remember this week President Trump called Pope Leo weak on crime and foreign policy. Well, the Pope does have a new supporter. Who is it? Here's a hint. They share a very close border. It's Italy's Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni. Meloni spoke to reporters.
Le dichiarazioni in particolare sul pontefice fossero inaccettabili. Esprimo la mia solidarietà a Papa Leone.
Trump responded saying, quote, she's unacceptable because she doesn't mind that Iran has a nuclear weapon and would blow up Italy in 2 minutes if they had the chance, end quote. Just 1 year ago, Trump and Meloni were pals.
Prime Minister Meloni, who's doing a fantastic job. I would say that she has taken Europe by storm and highly respected. Everybody loves her and respects her, and I can't say that about many people. And she's become a friend, and we really have a great relationship between Italy and ourselves.
A lot can happen in a year. Coming up, a social media star caught on video harassing animals. We're going to show you that video when the record continues.
It's our America. We built it. Courage, freedom. Millions go to Newsmax when they need to know. Start today on the free Newsmax app. Newsmax is real news for real people.
Larry was in a really bad accident and broke his neck. In the line of duty.
I get a phone call early one morning from the Tunnel Towers Foundation. Said, we're going to provide you and your family with a smart home. At that time, I just almost passed out. I just couldn't believe it.
They heard his story, which means someone's out there listening.
By giving $11 a month, you're joining us on our mission to do good. Go to T2T.org now.
Before Apoquel Chewable for allergic itch, giving dogs pills was a battle of wits.
Oh, Maria, I'm wise to your foolish game.
Is it gone?
Totally gone.
Relief for itchy dogs can be easier. Apoquel, the trusted #1 treatment for allergic itch, is available in a tasty chewable that works fast.
May cause worsening of existing parasitic skin infestations, serious infections, or pre-existing cancers. New neoplasias have been observed. Do not use in dogs under 12 months of age with serious infections or in breeding, pregnant, or lactating dogs.
Ask your vet for Apoquel chewable.
Do it!
Falls are the #1 cause of injury to senior citizens. Falling downstairs can be disastrous. Acorn Stair Lifts has the solution. Just don't fall. Sit, relax, ride with an Acorn Stair Lift, the world's leader in stair lifts. That's right, don't let limited mobility keep you from going up and down your stairs, even outside. Call Acorn Stair Lifts now for a free information kit and no obligation quote. Now you can safely ride with your Acorn Stair Lift.
Now I don't have to worry about him climbing those stairs anymore.
And our Acorn Stair Lift was very affordable.
Our Acorn Stair Lift is definitely more affordable than moving.
The Acorn Stair Lift has a padded seat and backrest for maximum comfort. It easily folds up for access to the stairway. 5 safety sensors stop your Acorn Stair Lift if there is something in the way. And it even runs during power outages.
I am king of my castle again.
You'll be working directly with the world's leader in stair lifts. That's right, there's no middleman. Acorn's trained technicians professionally install your stair lift directly to the staircase. In most cases, in 2 hours or less. There's no need for special construction. We don't leave until you're completely comfortable using your Acorn Stair Lift.
Don't risk a serious fall going down the stairs.
I was really surprised at how little it cost.
Call for your free no-obligation information kit and quote from Acorn Stair Lifts. Just don't fall. Safely ride up and down your steps.
Give your life a lift with Acorn Stair Lifts.
Call 1-800-908-4077 right now for your free information kit or visit our website today. That number again is 1-800-908-4077. Call now.
Here at Allegiance, we feel like American flags should be made in America.
When we started Allegiance, we were shocked to learn how many American flags were actually being made overseas.
Every flag we make is proudly crafted in the USA with superior materials.
Join us in our mission to keep the American flag truly American.
Visit showallegiance.com to order your high-quality American flag today. That's showallegiance.com.
An artificial intelligence robot is trying to do a new job in a new industry, animal control. This robot was caught on video chasing wild boars through Warsaw, Poland. The population of wild boars in Poland has been exploding, and these boars have been wandering into city streets. So this robot went to work. He chased them back into the woods. The robot's name? Yes, he has a name. His name is Edward. Edward has become a social media star in Poland. Locals know him and they love him. He makes appearances around the city and at events. One problem with Edward is that he doesn't run very fast. Maybe a software update can fix that. Thank you for watching. Ed Henry, The Big Take, is next. Stay with Newsmax.